Good morning, everybody. If you are doing a breakout report and you are not down at the front, you should go ahead and come down. Sure. Yep. I'm going to let you handle it. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with our breakout report outs. We'll start with session 4, which, if you remember yesterday, was all about secondary reactions and other challenges that we might encounter with MRV other than just measuring carbon or carbon equivalents. Gabby, I think you're first.
Hey everyone, smaller group today. I'm Gabby Kitch. I'm currently with NOAA Ocean Acidification Program. So I'm going to be talking about the main takeaways and learnings from group discussions. The first one we talked about was cumulative or cascading effects instead of simply just co-benefits. So I think this was mentioned a lot in the talks too, and talking about potential other issues that might come up when we start scaling these projects. And then also a note that the ocean acidification community has been doing this for about 10 years and monitoring, what different biological effects are to changes in chemistry. So maybe we should think more intentionally about what lessons could be learned from that community, engaging specifically with the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network. And then the second point here, let's see if I can do this. There we go. Something that came up a lot is building bridges to other communities that might have insights similar to the ocean acidification community point, thinking about engaging communities like fisheries. I think Gracie brought this up too, potentially, or yesterday during the big plenary discussion. Also offshore wind, paleoceanography communities that have experience using scarce data and or environmental monitoring to create models and measure environmental impacts. And with that, Kara.
Hi, I'm Kara Manning from UConn, talking about my favorite topic, concerns and impediments. We talked a lot, I think, in a lot of the groups about how potentially for the first studies being proof of concept, they might need to demonstrate all the things, measure a lot of different parameters that might not be necessary once the technology is actually validated. We still, I think, have a lot of questions about what's necessary for a proof of concept study, what would actually need to be measured, and how certain they would need to be in their end results and their conclusions from how much carbon was actually being taken up. I think a lot of groups also focus on a lot of different pathways that are difficult to measure for MRV. Those would include zooplankton mediated carbon export, what happens to carbon that gets converted to DOC, do these things need to be measured, and then just generally anything that happens on a long-term time scale, which of course includes the CO2 re-equilibration time scale. Anything that spreads over too much geographic area, signals get diluted, or you just don't have the platforms to measure because it's moved away from your measurement platform or your model domain. And how do you prioritize the difficult measurements that maybe only a few labs in the world might be able to do? How do you decide which ones to do for which study? We talked about issues of lag. So potentially impacts that could happen after that are happening long after you actually perturb the system, that might also be important to monitor. And then just a general question of, the challenges of distinguishing between different processes, to be able to actually isolate how much carbon was removed from whatever perturbation you're adding to the system. And I'll leave it there.
Hi, good morning. I'm Erica LaPlante. I'm a faculty at University of Texas, Arlington. I have affiliation with Sea Change and Institute for Carbon Management at UCLA. So today, talking about the key questions and opportunities that came up during the breakout sessions. First, that the natural analogs are perhaps currently underutilized, and especially for ecological impacts. This may be a good way to understand those impacts while simplifying measurements and modeling that's needed. The second key question would be how should we set priorities, and how do we make these choices early on and what to study? But also on the other hand, maybe for most processes, we would like to be able to measure most of the things. So we would like to be able to measure biological and chemical parameters. One example would be using tracers for establishing rates or spike type experiments. There's programs already trying to do this, and there's opportunities to find new ways to do it. And also there's a question of, should we be trying to measure things in multiple ways? And by doing this, then we can find how to make these measurements best, and we can compare them with each other and ground truth these measurements, find consensus and match with the literature. And also another aspect would be to include life cycle analysis, not only of the embodied CO2 emission of the CDR technology, but also of the MRV that we are doing. And I'll turn it over to Ken to discuss the last point. Thank you.
I think this got put to me because we didn't have complete agreement. That's on the wrong way. Look at this guy. I just missed my bullet. How do I make this document move down? I can see, I want to see that and the rest of this section. That is the last part. Basically, I think, who was it, Chris? Someone had this great idea of how do we think about ecological monitoring in context of CDR. So that circle, if you can see in the middle, it just says CDR. Ken Bissler, by the way, Woods Hole, sorry. Right around that's MRV for carbon. And so we were kind of questioning where does ecology fit in. So we put another circle around that. It says ecosystems monitoring. Around that, we hadn't had the discussion about the social effects, social license kind of issues. But that gave us a way to think about, okay, we were trying within the group, does MRV include the ecosystem monitoring? Where do you put that circle? And really what we talked a lot about is, at least for the early part, you need it at least around that ecosystems monitoring. If we're gonna do CDR, we need the carbon MRV and we need the ecosystem, but maybe that shrinks back over time. We need less of that because we've kind of convinced ourselves that for a given approach, we don't need all of that. And so we did not end up deciding. In fact, there were difference of opinion whether ecosystems was MRV or not. So we could all debate and fight it out, just leave it at that. But it was a way to visualize what we're talking about. Some of the stickies I think one to point out is, should the profit from the center ring fund the outer ring? So how do you end up doing that? And that included some of the ecosystems monitoring, but certainly the social and other issues. So that was something we got into, might be not part of our purview, but kind of interesting stuff. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Veronica from the University of South Florida. So some of the kind of actions that we took away from this group discussion is in quotes here, never been to a workshop where the conclusion wasn't that observationalists and modelers need to work together. So maybe that's more of a call to action than a specific action, but we did sort of talk about the ways we can better incentivize kind of that kind of cross domain work with modelers and obs. Another thing we talked about as action is initially these like more complex pathways and ecosystem impacts need to be measured in as much detail as we can in these field experiments. And from that, the intent is that we can develop process level understanding And with that, see whether there are potential proxies or improvements to model parameterizations that allow things to be a little less intensively sampled when things begin to scale. Another key kind of action is forming partnerships wherever possible, that in order to measure this sort of huge range of potential impacts, we need a lot of working together, and also piggybacking on existing time series observation sites that do include a lot of these biological and ecosystem impacts. That was an example here of a site where there's already been a lot of ongoing monitoring across a lot of different parameters. Another potential action was to sort of create decision support tools that identify times and places that are ideal for creating effective CDR, but also that these might be somewhat different from the locations where there's easy, I guess there's no such thing as easy MRV, but where MRV may be more optimal based on existing infrastructure or other characteristics of locations. And then the final thing was, maybe creating some kind of toolkit or reference for what we think the bare minimum measurements are that need to be made. And this will depend on the scale of a project. For sort of a scoping project may have less, a small scoping project may have less requirements than a full field trial. So thinking about what those kind of bare minimum requirements would be. That's it.
Who's in charge here?
Yeah, that's it.
Next group, session 5.
Okay, hello, everybody. I'm Mary Margaret. I'm a grad student at the University of Washington, and Ryan and I are going to be sharing some of the main points from the justice session yesterday. So we have a lot of bullet points on here, but we're going to do our best to kind of distill main points. So as for takeaways and learnings, I think one of the most important takeaways is that engagement with communities is necessary, but is going to look different depending on where you are. So whether you're in a coastal community or in an inland community, or talking with an indigenous community, like there is going to be some difference in engagement and kind of education that will lead to just interactions and relationships with those communities. And kind of one of our other main takeaways is that moral hazard is less a part of the conversation than maybe it was 2 years ago. I think we are all on the same page that reducing emissions always has been and is still the main goal to mitigate climate change, and CDR plays an important role in that. But we need to make sure that that main point is not lost in the conversations that we're having about CDR. And then as for concerns and impediments, we kind of kept falling on this theme of mismatches. So, in terms of power structures, it's going to be important to think about who is implementing the projects, but where and in what communities those projects are being deployed. So this is something we should be aware about when engaging in conversations about where and how to do mCDR. And then we also have this mismatch in scales, both spatially and temporally. So like in terms of mCDR impacts, like the impacts are immediate at the site of deployment, but kind of the benefits are kind of diffuse in terms of carbon removal. So kind of balancing these power dynamics and the spatial and temporal scales when thinking about mCDR will be important moving forward.
I'm Ryan. I'm a PhD student at UC Santa Cruz. This is the first time you heard from me, so hello if I haven't met you yet. For our key questions and opportunities, again, we're synthesizing this into things that hopefully you can walk away with and still be thinking about. And the main thing that we kind of came down to is that how do we create incentives in this environment that encourage this good faith behaviors and the environmental justice. We're thinking right now it's a lot on the individual to do good. And if we incorporate that into the process, it'll help us moving forward. We talked a little bit about co-benefits, sometimes like, the megafauna thing with marine biology gets people excited. So we're thinking about ocean acidification and other stuff like that could also get communities excited. Moving on to actions, a couple things. We talked about how important it is to be trustworthy with all the parties involved, the local communities, the buyers and the sellers, and being trustworthy among all those people. Careful language was pretty important. Jamie brought up a story about Horizon Milk and how it says carbon positive on the front and how, misleading that could be. What does that even mean? So being descriptive, talking about, we're removing and storing carbon, and offsets can be, gives you the idea that you're emitting more so that you can offset. And that's just, it's important to be descriptive. And yeah, I think that there's obviously, you can go look at these later on, but I think those were kind of the main points we were trying to talk about. So.
Questions, comments? You have the microphones.
Yeah, so this is Will from Planetary. This is excellent. Thank you so much. This is for a company like ours that this is just really, really helpful and useful. And I just want to say that this idea, one of the things that really caught my attention was the idea of a bare minimum measurement requirement for a project at a certain scale. That sort of thing speaks to me, because I'm always asking the question of what's enough for this level of project. So anyway, thank you for that.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, breakout groups. Who's in charge of this session? Am I? So yeah, okay, so we're gonna.
This one, final day activities. Yeah.
Okay, so in this last sort of culminating section of the workshop, we have two overarching objectives. The first objective is to provide content that will enable us to write a summary document that summarizes the outcomes of this workshop. And I think we should think of that as we all arrived here with, a diversity of perspectives and knowledge, a basic sense of knowledge about MRV for marine CDR. And over the course of this week, as a group, we've just had discussions and seen a bunch of talks, and we've sort of leveled that knowledge playing field to an extent through our collective interactions. But our task now is to really encapsulate all the elements of the discussion throughout the week in a framework that enables the organizers of this workshop to pull the threads together and write something that's compelling, preferably for release to the community in the form of an EOS article or similar. And so we have a procedure for generating that content, and that's illustrated here. So the first objective is focused on describing this workshop and the outcomes of this workshop. The second objective that we'll consider next will be to identify sort of a founding charter for an ongoing effort in the form of an OCB working group. Okay, so the same principles apply in that we'd like collective input that enables that working group to function optimally and be effective moving forward on this topic. So that's the overarching goals, and I'll turn it over to Heather or Jess for the details of how.
So this is pretty simple. We've set up large sheets of paper on the walls, and they're in groups of 2. There's 2 sheets for each group. Your group numbers are going to be determined by your seat number. So if you look down at your seat number, so all the 1s will be together, all the 2s, all the 3s, all the 4s. The groups are going to be different sizes. I can't help that. So if you sat next to your friend, you're going to be in a different group. So if you just have to walk around and look for your group's sheets, you're going to be answering 2 questions in this first hour, this first gallery walk activity. You'll spend about 30 minutes on the first question and 30 minutes on the second question. And this really is going to form the content of an article that we would want to publish in a venue like EOS or something similar. Take your group number and you're going to wander around. So we've got groups 1, 2, and 3 are in here. So you'll see there are 6 sheets on the wall. And then the hazard A and B have the remainders of the groups. So if you walk down, we're going right in order. So I think 4 through 7 is in the next room, and then 8 through 10 is in the next room. You want to spend about 15 minutes together as a group, just with your sticky notepads, writing down ideas to address the question that's on the sheet we start with round 1. And that is all about, what is the message you think we need to get out? What's the most important message we want to convey to the scientific community when it comes to mCDR, MRV? And then in round 2, we're going to be pivoting a little bit to direct a message to the funders. Any funder you can think of, philanthropists, private foundations, funding agencies. Do you want to, you can intervene anytime. All right. So you're going to spend 15 minutes writing your ideas down, brainstorm, throwing sticky notes up. And then you're going to spend 10 minutes as a team walking around and looking at what's happening on the other sheets. And we're going to give you prompts with a time. We'll time this so we can kind of tell you when to go where. So you spend a little time thinking outside your little group box. And then in the last 5 minutes, you're going to vote on your favorite answers. And you can do that just by putting a check mark. We don't have any stickies, so you can put a check mark on the ideas that kind of percolate to the top for you. What I will ask each of the groups to do is once you've all put your brainstorming ideas on your sticky notes, reserve a couple minutes at the end of that 15 minutes to kind of distill the top 5 and write them on the paper. So you got a bunch of sticky notes, distill the top 5 for your group and write them on the paper. And that's what we're actually going to be voting on when we go around the group. Is about as clear as mud? Does everybody understand?
It's going to feel a little bit chaotic, especially when we all start moving around. That's sort of the purpose. We want the room to feel like it's full of energy. Yeah, go ahead. Yep. Yep. If you hate it, we can think through it.
For those who are online listening in,
it's just going to take me a few minutes while we get everybody set up in here and then everybody set up online. I will be on the WebEx. It just may be a second.
Yep.
For those of you that are online and are going to be joining us via mural, hello. You'll notice that this is very similar to some of the activities that we've done before. And don't worry, I have some ideas for how you can, as we have been this week, how we can extend sort of our capacity to keep talking about these ideas and coming up with some action. So just give us a few minutes to set everybody up in here and I'll meet you on the WebEx.
All right. Yeah. So 1s, 2s, and 3s in here. 4 through 7 in the next room in hazard A. They already know. I already told them. Yeah.
Usually when I hear the instructions in the beginning, I forget them.
You too now? Yeah. They'll all be coming up and asking me.
They probably will.
That's how it works, right? That's how it works. Where do I go?
And what did we end up going for part 2?
Part 2. So the part 1 is what is the main message? today? Yeah,
If we do the 5, oh no, the part 2 will be the funders.
funders, yes. Yeah. Yes. No, yes, you should. Absolutely.
When they were putting up flux towers, he measured national combinations, which ended up being a measure testing done. That definitely would elevate
Yeah.
the bar in terms of. You know, and it would be a word. Yeah. Because of the 5% of the meeting reports, everything else, and therefore, their experience.
Yeah, meeting reports and EOS are a whole different ballgame now. You have to, it needs to be rooted in moving a science field forward. It's not about just a meeting report.
Yeah. I'll get started.
I have this ready to.
I love it.
But like, these are like, like, they're not really
Seconded.
If we can gently herd you back into your seats, those giving pitches to the front, those listening to pitch revisions in listening mode, if we can gently encourage you back. All right, if you are giving a pitch revision, pitches to the front. Pitches to the front. Who's up first? Who's gonna join us first? Ken, are you gonna join us first again?
If you want, we'll go in the same order.
Yeah, I think that sounds just fine to me. We can even go in the same order. Grab a mic, Ken, and we're gonna hear pitch revisions from Ken first.
So I think what I'm supposed to do is say with the comments I got back, and mostly there's a lot of people saying goodbye because they're leaving. But we did get some things like this working group, this is on communications. This can't end in 18 months. It's far too long. It's far too ambitious. So things like that. So we have to define deliverables, which we haven't done at all. We have to think about the overlap. If we do these other things, there seem to be some good ones. Let's say you make a, what was that going to be called? A CDR 101, 2-hour video, whatever, instructional material. Well, that's certainly fits one of our audiences, fellow scientists, but we also want to make the 2-minute version of that so that we can get out to broader people. No one's going to watch a 2-hour video in marine CDR. So that came up in this sort of chaotic last couple of minutes. What else? The overlap. Oh, social media. David's still here. I don't know if there's a role for social media and doing these types of messaging. Certainly there is a role, but how effective could we be? How deliberate do we need to be in doing that? Or do we just leave that to David and others? No, there's other social media. So.
Ken?
I'm Ryan with the matchmaking committee here, and we got 2 comments. One, keep it simple. I think in that realm, thinking more so it would be just you put in like your information, you're a scientist, you work with OAE, your institution, and then there's also industry people in there, and they just would come in and say, I am an industry person. I'm looking for scientific expertise in OAE. And then you would have a directory of people that you could then go contact, instead of just being like posting questions and a list of that type of thing, but more so just the directory contact, getting the communities together was the most important part of it. There was a challenge for quality listings, and we were thinking that there had to be some sort of either an invite only, or like there needs to be a gatekeeper that is looking at applications in before they get approved. Yeah.
I'm Randy, University of Washington. Our working group was about developing a code of conduct, and the feedback we got was how would this be enforced? And then how does this overlap with what AGU is already doing? I don't think our group knew that, and we didn't really get to discuss our feedback as a group. So that's all that I have to say.
So we had an opportunity to refine our working group, and really the problem here that we've identified is that we're building up a research community and our research capacity really quickly, and that requires that we all know about resources and about the tools that we need to be successful. So we got some really good feedback. Some of that was that a number of these as part of the stakeholder map that will identify which opportunities or structures already exist. There's a bunch of things that have been spooled up, like different email lists or online communities, so that we could sort of assimilate those. Another really good piece of feedback that we got was that if this is 18 months and we sort of develop this, that many of these resources need to be sustained to be useful. And so part of the goal would be to develop a strategy for sustaining this effort. And we also got some good advice on other aspects of the stakeholder map that needed to be included.
Group 5 here, we were talking about the knowledge-based tutorial 101. So one comment we got is also to keep it simple. So for example, if we have if we want to talk about the pathways, like 6 pathways of CDR, and we don't have to dive too deep into any of the method, but just give an overview for what is out there, and just make people, bring people up to speed, or bring everyone on the same page. The other aspect, another comment we received is to decide between synchronizing the tutorial or non-synchronizing, because like I think it's going to be beneficial if we do it live, either a hybrid or a Zoom approach, because that's going to give people who have questions to ask their stupid questions, like to make themselves feel like included, so that they don't like me, who have some trouble in trying to figuring out some of the talks. So if they don't have that kind of feeling, then they will be getting more involved in the community. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So Alicia Karsbeck, we were group 2, so we're out of order here. So we were the group that talked about forming a sort of an ad hoc working group around creating a ad hoc group for doing some policy, can you not hear me? Some policy advocacy at the legislative level. And just to remind everyone what it was about, the focus of it would very much be on marine CDR, MRV, so sort of narrowing the focus there. And it would involve both having training in that kind of media relations for the scientists, and then also sort of distilling some of the main points that the MRV community wants to get communicated, not just to the broad policy sphere, but particularly up to the legislative levels and to senior agency leadership. Okay. So, and then with some specific deliverables around some congressional briefings and particular meetings with senior agency leadership. So some of the pushback that we got from that was that it would be nice that there was a more explicit involvement of what some private sector concerns are. So when we think about distilling what are the key topics, we want to involve the private sector in that. The other pushback we got was that it was really important to have that explicit training on kind of the media relations piece of that. So that would have to be an important part of it. The other piece was that a concern that scientists are uncomfortable in that sphere, and that no one will want to participate in it. I'm pushing back a little bit. I think the fact that it's a little bit outside of people's typical area of comfort might actually attract a lot of people to it. It's sort of a area that's different from the more traditional things that scientists are doing. And some worries about, okay, I don't know what this one is. Yeah, so that's the refinement for ours.
Hi, Sarah Cooley. We were talking about the justice working group paired with the sort of crash course and help building scientists from the bridges between the scientists in this community and experts on justice. One of the challenges it was that a lot of scientists in this OCB community don't know how to find their way in to the justice topic, which I think maybe the crash course could really help with. Another challenge was, how do we find the right people who are interested in justice and CDR, like the social scientist external to this community? There are a few people who I can think of who might not be the right people, but like they can help us network with the right people. And also, quite frankly, the definition of ocean justice is being written right now. So this community is not that far behind in terms of like, we don't really know what this is because a lot of people don't. So I think there's a real opportunity to engage people interested in justice on this emerging topic, just as we in this community are interested in the emerging topic of ocean and climate environmental justice. We got feedback that it was sort of within scope for what OCB can actually do in terms of like running courses and working groups and things like this. So yeah, so I think that's about it. Any questions? No, we don't have time for questions. 30 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, group 7, one of them, the goals for our working group was to produce a document or report that outlines kind of guidelines or requirements for MRV for field trials, and then potentially kind of envisioning what that looks like as things scale. The main piece of feedback we got was that some people liked that, and that is quite a big task, and that could just be the entire focus of the working group, and sort of let go of trying to do multiple big tasks in 18-month time frame. I think that was the only feedback we got. Yeah.
So we're done? Who's in charge? Somebody should grab Jessica. Heather, do you have? Yeah, okay, so let's just open the floor for discussion, and floor is open. So please raise your hand if you have something to share. Nicola.
Nicola Wiseman, UC Irvine. Maybe I'm a little biased because this was the group that I was in. If we're going to be talking about the pitches, one thing that I can say from the graduate student perspective is that there are a lot of graduate students that are really interested in engaging with the justice topic. And so like there was a conversation that we were having over there about, you know, on the PI level, maybe people are feeling sort of burnt out because they don't actually, you know, it is sort of this new thing that's now being sort of required and emphasized. And a lot of it may have to do with just not knowing where to start. But I just want to say that on the sort of lower side, if we're talking about building capacity and sort of strengthening, you know, bringing in sort of newer people to contribute to personnel and expanding that capacity, engaging in some sort of justice working group I think will really engage some of the newer scientists and get people more involved.
David Ho from University of Hawaii. So I was surprised when I gave my talk and well, when I saw the other talks, that a lot of people didn't have these other disclosures about groups that they're working with. And I think that's been one of the most effective things that I could do to sort of bridge the academic research community with, you know, the funders and also with industry. So I would encourage that. But at the same time, I think, you know, I've been very busy for the past year or two, but I have nothing traditional to show for it, no publications, right? So if you're early career, like an assistant professor, and you're trying to get tenure, it's tough, right? So we have to figure out how to balance those two things.
Hi, Grace, Vesta. This is like just a generic parting word that I've had a chance to talk with many of you about, but I just want to like sort of put it out there as a final thought. When we think about MRV, obviously the focus for this workshop was to think about MRV primarily from a science point of view, but not always, primarily. Just to encourage everyone, being a practitioner, someone who is not thinking about what an MRV is in the future, but who is literally, this is what I do every day, is build MRV. This is what I do. That just to encourage everyone to keep in mind that MRV is so much more than science. And that we've talked about some of them here, but there's so many aspects that go into it. And so to just keep an open mind about, and talk to people like me about what are some of the other things that go into the decision-making process around MRV. Start to sort of broaden the box around a little bit about how we can think creatively about how to do this.
Yeah, Adam Savash with Soul Oceanographic. This workshop has been really great. I feel like we have a rapport now among this group that is not like, we may not see some of these same people at other conferences and things like that. Might be really great to have some more informal sort of continued avenues of communication amongst this group, because it's a little bit non-traditional. Slack, something else, having a community of people who are able to continue this conversation informally might be really, really nice. Something to consider for OCB or someone else. Yeah.
And I should say, Patrick Rafter, UC Irvine, if we had a Slack group or some way to continue this communication, amongst this new community, we can maybe form more of these public-private sector partnerships.
So I'm Ben Swainbank, Coastal Carbon Solutions. I just want to say I really appreciated the seminar and the ability to kind of get private sector involved. But one of the comments I've heard a little bit is that, well, it's kind of happening without us. And so we kind of want to, make sure that they're not going to screw it up, or that they're not gonna, get it wrong, or at least slow it down a little bit. And there's some truth to that, but also to some extent, from what I've seen, kind of talking with other people trying to do CDR, there's certainly interest in it, right? There's lots of people that see this is vital, that if we're going to solve the climate crisis, if we need CDR at a massive scale, if we're going to do CDR at a massive scale, we got to include the oceans, right? And so there's definitely interest, right? There's need. But also the thing that unlocks marine CDR is MRV. The product is proof that you got the carbon out of the air. And as the people here know, that's very hard to provide. These kind of obscure topics of how do we measure carbon fluxes in the ocean are difficult, but they are the secret to unlocking marine CDR. So this notion that it won't happen without us, it's happening without us. To some extent, the opposite is true, or at least I want to kind of plant that seed that it can't happen, right? But this is vital information, and you are the experts, and so I mean that as hopefully somewhat reassuring, but also really a call to arms that this is vital information, and your participation is really important.
Maybe I could just share a reflection. I'm using the mic. Yeah.
That's Matt Long speaking.
So I just want to think, or sort of reflect on, how I've approached this problem personally, because I spent, the majority of my research career thinking about how to describe aspects of the climate change problem, including things like deoxygenation of the ocean, which is, really worrying trends and threatens marine ecosystems. And part of the thing that I find really exciting about CDR is the potential to contribute toward solutions. And I also think there's sort of this meta thing going on, or potential, that as we come together as a community, we have the opportunity to find sort of new modes by which society operates to solve problems and build, networks comprising, people and technology and knowledge to promote sustainable outcomes. And I think that in particular is really exciting because it has the potential to project onto issues that go beyond this specific one. And so I think we should consider ourselves kind of, or our enterprise should be to build an exemplary community that the principles of which might be adapted more broadly as the size of the planet shrinks and human impact continues to grow. We need to establish new norms of interaction. And so that's another component about this problem that I find super interesting and compelling. It's just inspiring to see people from companies in the room who are out there trying to do something and trying to make sure that the answers are right. And, the aspects of justice and the components by which we comport ourselves and ensure transparency. And then, the hardcore biogeochemistry community that's been thinking about how to quantify the biological pump. Suddenly all this knowledge base is actionable, and we have real world partners to receive that knowledge. And so I just think that we're at this unique moment in history, and I feel it's really exciting. So I look forward to approaching the next, several months to years with this enthusiasm to get things done.
So from here, I wonder if I could get the other members of the steering committee to come down to the front. Want you all to know the severity with which I flogged these people and made them do all the work when I left a month before this workshop was going to happen. So thanks very much to everybody that's on the steering committee, most especially also to our scientific support team, Heather Benway and May, our fearless electronics leader, and Mary Zawoyski, who did our logistics, who isn't here with us, but nonetheless is well deserving of a round of applause. And then the last round of applause I want to offer is for you. We worked so hard to make you guys do all of the work. You got up early, you stayed late, you continued into dinner. We really, really appreciate all of the feedback that you shared with us. And we hope you feel like this was a two-way conversation and that we're able to take all of your community consensus forward as we continue to plan this working trip. So well done, everyone in the room. Well done, everyone online who used unique tools to participate in here. And thanks also to everybody who, after this point, is listening to the recorded sessions. We really appreciate that you're here with us and that you found a way to engage with this community, even though you couldn't be here this time.
And
With that,
Jessica can't thank herself. So Jessica, who led this.
and with that, I think we are closed. Heather, would you like to close with some logistics?
It's just a slide. I want to take a minute to just thank all of the online participants, because if I could show you what they've been doing with these mural boards, you would be blown away. Jessica set up the most engaging online tools for participation, and those mural boards are actually all accessible in the breakout documents. And you'll be able to also access what they were working on today. While we were running around putting sticky notes on paper, they were doing it virtually, and they
There's
did an
11
amazing
pitches
job.
in their board that you guys didn't get to hear that we hope you'll interact with later.
So please, yeah, go in and look and see what was done. And we don't have a way to have two-way communication. The AV doesn't really work for people that are participating virtually, but May and I put together a survey that we would love for you to take that will talk about the workshop, but also about next steps. So please take a few minutes the QR code is right there. I think we'll send it to you in an email too, if you don't want to do the QR code thing. I just want to remind you that OCB has a lot of support roles to play in this realm. I started the meeting with this slide and I'll end with this slide. We've been doing this since 2006. Community science activities, doesn't just include workshops, it's working groups, it's synthesis work, it's intercomparison, intercalibration activities, it's training and capacity building activities. And we have been a leader and a participant in national and international science planning, so we can have a voice and we can help you engage on this as a community. Communication and networking, I saw this come up in a lot of your pitches, so this might be an area where we can help because we have a lot of expertise in this area. And we welcome partnerships on making this communication more effective to different groups. Training and capacity building, I saw that come up a lot on the sticky notes and in the pitches. It's the next generation of scientists that are going to carry this forward and build a career out of it. So it is really important to me personally, but to OCB and this group, this steering committee, that we find a way to do that. And finally, education and outreach has always been and will continue to be something we try to do to get our message out to the broader community about how the ocean carbon cycle works. And so we are open to your ideas. That's what we do. So with that, I want to close the meeting and let you all go get lunch. Thank you.